Good morning, everybody, and welcome along to this morning's BCP Planning Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Kelsey, and it's my job to chair the meeting this morning. The first thing we'll do is to pass to Ms Hollyoak from Democratic Services to read out the housekeeping notice.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Planning Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. Please use the microphones on your desk when speaking, and please remember to turn them off when you are finished. If accessing the meeting via Microsoft Teams, please turn on your video function when invited to speak. Again, if you are accessing via Teams and would like to speak on an item, please do so by using the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. When voting on a move, the Chairman will call out each committee member's name in roll call style and will ask the member to respond with a vote for, against or abstain. For those in the room, if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Please note that this includes members' laptops. Please turn off laptop cameras and microphones and turn the volume all the way down to ensure there is no disruption or feedback during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hollyoak. I will now ask committee members to indicate themselves that they are here, calling out their names in turn. As I say, my name is Councillor Kelsey. I'm the chairman. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Toby Johnson, Ward Member for Alderney and Bourne Valley and Vice Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Steve Barron.
Councillor Steve Barron, Parkstone Ward Councillor.
Councillor Stephen Bartlett.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Steve Bartlett, Member for Redhill and Northbourne.
Councillor Derek Borthwick. Could you use your microphone, please, Councillor?
Yes, Councillor Derek Borthwick, Stratton Park and Muscliffe, substituting for Tony O'Neill.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Bull.
Good morning, Councillor Simon Bull, Winton East Ward.
Councillor Malcolm Davies.
Councillor Malcolm Davies, East Southbourne and Tepperton Ward.
Councillor Peter Hall.
Peter Hall, Councillor for Christchurch Town Centre.
Councillor Paul Hilliard.
Paul Hilliard, Councillor for Muddyford, West Highcliffe and Stampit.
Councillor Marion Lepedevin.
Marion Lepedevin, Member for Newtown and Heatherlands Ward.
And Councillor Tony Trent.
Councillor Tony Trent, Member for Alderney and Bourne Valley.
Thank you, members. We also have several officers with us this morning.
Excuse me, Chairman, am I not here?
Oh, sorry. No. Councillor Stribby, you were down as apologies and you're not on my list, but welcome along if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Anne Stribley, Parkstone Ward Councillor.
Thank you very much. So, Mr Perrins. Is Nick with us, Simon?
Morning, Chairman. I think Nick will be joining us later on.
Okay, thank you. So, Simon Gould, introduce yourself.
Hi, Chairman. Simon Gould, DM Manager.
Mr Hodges.
Good morning, Chairman. David Hodges, Team Leader, Development Management.
Artemis Christophe.
Morning, Chair. Artemis Christophe, DM Manager for BCP.
Thank you. Sophie Maudsley.
Good morning, Chairman. Sophie Maudsley, Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you. Tom Hubbard. Tom,
Sorry.
You're on mute.
Sorry, Tom Hubbard, Senior Planning Officer.
Thank you. Emma Churi.
Yeah. Good morning, Chairman. Emma Mashuri, Senior Planning Officer.
Rebecca Murunga, sorry.
Chairman, I think Rebecca will join the meeting later because her item is towards the end.
Thank you very much. Lee Smith.
Good morning. Good morning. It's Lee Smith, Team Leader from representing the Highway Authority for the Barwick Road application if needed.
Thank you. And Mr Robert Firth.
Morning, Chairman. Robert Firth, Senior Solicitor.
Thank you. We also have Jill Hollyoak and Chris Harrod from Democratic Services, who are both beavering away here in the background for us. and there are other officers from Democratic Services providing technical support to the meeting. We'll now move on to the agenda for this meeting. First item being apologies. Do we have apologies, please, Ms Hollyoak?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've had apologies from councillors Brian Dean, George Farquhar, Tony O'Neill and Simon McCormack. And for item 2, substitute members, Councillor Derek Borthwick is here for Councillor Tony O'Neill.
Thank you. Members, are there any declarations of interest for any items on today's agenda? No, we'll take that as 0. Do we confirm the minutes for the previous meetings, please? Yep, thank you very much. And then we go on to public issues and the schedule of planning applications. And the first one that we have this morning is item 6A, which is 215 to 225 Barrack Road, Christchurch. And I would ask the officer to present their case, please, and that being Sophie Maudsley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Hear that? Can we turn the volume up? Could I just hold you for a second, Sophie, while we adjust the volume? Thank you. Yeah. Sophie, could you adjust your microphone slightly?
Yeah, is that any better? Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So this application is 215 to 225 Barrack Road. It's for the demolition of the existing buildings and the erection of 3 blocks of 38 flats with the associated parking and access. The scheme includes the provision of 20 one-bed flats and 18 two-bed flats. Here we have the location. The application site is currently occupied by 4 semi-detached dwellings, a detached dwelling with a car sales and servicing business associated with it, and a Chinese restaurant with the flat above. The site is within an urban area along a prime transport corridor into the town centre of Christchurch. A material consideration in the determination of this application is the extant permission on a slightly smaller site of 217 to 225 Barrack Road for 34 flats within 3 blocks. You will note that the layout is similar to the current proposal, although the buildings are of a more traditional style and are 2.5 storey in height. Here we have the proposed site plan. The siting of the 3 blocks respects the building line along Barrack Road. It is appreciated that the depth of the built form is increasing. However, it's considered the site can accommodate this level of site coverage and still provide adequate areas of amenity to the rear and soft landscaping. With regards to the parking, the site is within Zone B, excuse me, which equates to 0 parking requirements for 1 and 2 bed flats as set out in the parking SPD. The over-provision of 19 spaces is considered to be acceptable given the parking on the extant consent, the level of parking that currently exists on the site. There is sufficient cycle parking provision along with 2 disabled parking spaces, and electrical charging points will be provided and secured by condition. It's considered that there will be a highway gain with the removal of 8 existing vehicle access points and the movements associated with the 2 businesses. The proposed development is surrounded by residential properties. Concerns have been raised in the representations regarding the loss of privacy, loss of sunlight, and noise and disturbance. Block A, as you can see from my cursor here, is sited adjacent to a building to the southwest, which is subdivided into flats. There are openings, including roof lights, on the side facing Block A. The 3rd storey of Block A has been stepped back to minimise the loss of lights, and there are no proposed openings at ground or 1st floor level. To the rear of Block A is 1 Gardner Road, which is this property here, a semi-detached dwelling. The plans have been amended to remove the balcony at 2nd storey closest to number 1, with only a Juliet balcony at 1st floor. This has helped to minimise harmful overlooking into the adjacent site. The separation distances are considered to be acceptable in this urban location, and the amenity area and soft landscaping help separate the buildings. The separation distances to the properties to the rear in Fitzmaurice Road, which are in excess of 30 metres, are also considered to be acceptable. 213, which lies to the southeast of Block C, where my cursor is now, the stepping back of the third floor, no proposed openings at ground and first floor level facing number 213, and the separation distance of 6 metres is considered sufficient to minimise harm to the occupiers of this building. Moving on to Block A elevations, as you can see, the blocks have a flat roof contemporary style with 3 stories of accommodation. The third level is set in and back along the side of the building, which reduces the mass and bulk of the block, and the total height is 9.5 metres. All of the flats meet the housing equality indicators for unit size, and a number of the flats have terraced and balcony areas. Block B is the central block. The proposed materials for all of the buildings consist of white render, buff brick, grey brick, and grey aluminium window and door frames. Block B proposed floor plans. You can see from the roof plan that solar panels will be installed on each of the 3 buildings. These plans also indicate how the third level has been stepped back in from the rear, which reduces the mass of the building and the potential overlooking when viewing the site from the dwellings in Fitzmaurice Road at the rear. Block C, this building has a similar form and appearance to the other 2 blocks. Again, this block has been stepped down and back on the southern eastern boundary. And Block C floor plans, the majority of flats have access to a balcony and terrace area, as well as the communal amenity areas in the rear of the site. Moving on to the street scene and section. Whilst the proposal is of a greater scale than the neighbouring properties, it's considered the street scene can accommodate the development without harming the visual amenities of the area. Higher densities in these areas are supported in the policies, and it is considered the development would sit comfortably along Barrack Road. At the top of your screen, you'll see at the street scene, this is number 213, and these buildings here are the ones to be demolished as part of the scheme. And the photo montages at the bottom are provided by the applicant and illustrate how the development would sit within the street scene. Just some aerial views of the site, clearly showing the amount of hard standing within the back of the site associated with the car servicing business and the Chinese restaurant. The scheme does provide the opportunity to introduce soft landscaping into the site. This top right photo shows the rear garden of number 217 and the existing foundation for the cycle store approved on the previous application. This photo at the bottom is the adjacent building to what will be Block A, and you can see the side openings on this property as well as roof lights within this side elevation. Here are just some photographs of examples of other contemporary flat developments along Barrack Road, and you can see the 3- and 4-storey height that have been approved within the area. Just on a few other issues, there's currently no viability for the provision of affordable housing. However, a review of this will be included within the Section 106 to ensure the situation can be reassessed if the development is not carried out promptly. And the Heathland mitigation for the SAM contribution will also be secured through the 106. The scheme before you, members, is considered to represent a sustainable form of development within the urban area, and its design and form is appropriate for this locality. As set out in the committee report in paragraphs 64 to 66, the tilted balance should be applied to this proposal. It is considered the scheme complies with the development plan as a whole, and balance is weighted in favour of approving the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do we have any people in objection, please, Ms. Holyoake?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, objection number 1 is from Susan Suleiman. This application has many issues of concern that have not been resolved. 1, there will be a significant impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties who enjoy high levels of privacy and very little overlooking. Due to the objections raised, the officer has spent time considering the existing neighbours but has only referred to building distances, which is irrelevant. The development will mean residents will not be able to enjoy their outdoor garden space due to the number and height of the flats. The significant amount of glazing and balconies will mean that the new residents will be looking into the gardens. Many of the adjoining residents will have parking spaces adjacent to their gardens, which will cause noise and light pollution. The proposed thin hedge along the rear boundary of the site will provide no buffer at all. 2. The rest home at 213 Barrack Road would be severely affected by Block C. The case officer states that there is a 6-metre separation between the boundary and the rest home. Again, the distance is irrelevant. The rooms facing the block of flats will be looking at a wall. This is the final home for some residents, and to minimise the impact is unreasonable. 3. The amount of open space on site fails to comply with Policy H12, Item 4. 4. Policy Ln3 requires that 40% of residential developments are affordable or social housing. No such provision is included in the application. 5. The new occupiers' living conditions will be less than ideal. The flats are set close to a busy road. The floor-to-ceiling glass is a trick to make very small rooms appear more spacious, but this causes problems due to a lack of wall space for storage and placing furniture. Occupants of similar flats leave their blinds closed for privacy or to keep sun out and heat in. 6. The case officer has stated that there should be houses on this site, however, is accepting flats. Flats impact negatively on the character and landscape, plus the outlook for neighbours. 7. The parking provision is inadequate on site. It is foreseeable that the residents could have approximately 50 vehicles between them, so 23 spaces is not enough. In view of the confined space for the whole site, there could be a condition that parking is for cars only, with no vans or other commercial vehicles. 8. A proposal to create a 2-way cycle lane on Barrack Road would create greater traffic problems than was relevant when the application was first published. The application is contrary to policies HE2, HE3, H11, H12, KS12, LN2 and LN3. The failure to observe so many mandatory requirements means this application must be refused. Second objection is from John Pendrill. The parking provision is inadequate on site. It is foreseeable that the residents could have approximately 50 vehicles between them, so 23 spaces is not enough. In view of the confined space for the whole site, there could be a condition that parking is for cars only, with no vans or other commercial vehicles. The bad impact on privacy of existing properties has not been corrected. A proposal to create a 2-way cycle lane on Barrack Road would create greater traffic problems than was relevant when the application was first published. The amount of open space on site fails to comply with Policy H12, Item 4. Policy Ln3 requires that 40% of residential developments are affordable or social housing. No such provision is included in the application. In total, the application is contrary to policies HE2, HE3, H11, H12, KS12, LN2 and LN3. The failure to observe so many mandatory requirements means this application must be refused. It is worth adding that the contents of my statement objecting to the application are supported by Christchurch Citizens Association. A statement in support of the application from the applicant, David Phillips. DWP's primary aim is to provide good quality long-term housing to the local community. This ethos has been personified in all of our new developments over the last few years. In line with this, we have for some time felt that the extant permission on this site does not match our business plan. The units are not up to our modern design standards and do not accord with our view on acceptable minimum size requirements that will in turn attract long-term tenants. With the benefit of being able to use the adjacent site, we have been able to resubmit planning for a new modern design scheme that delivers good quality accommodation that matches our size standards. Whilst the viability assessment has noted that the scheme is not viable from a developer's perspective, DWP are able to look at these types of investment differently. We build properties to satisfy long-term rental requirements and never with a view to resale. We understand that strong long-term rental stream combined with a buoyant property market will over time cover the delivery and construction costs. Here we see a unique opportunity to deliver a modern build project which will provide quality accommodation for the area. Second statement in support is from Ken Park, the agent for the applicant. Planning permission was granted in 2008 for a development comprising 3 blocks of flats with a total of 30 one-bed and 4 two-bed flats over 5 adjacent sites. That development was commenced but never built out for a variety of reasons. That permission remains extant. The scheme before you seeks to provide a much improved development of 3 blocks of flats with a total of 20 one-bed and 18 two-bed flats over a larger site comprising 6 adjoining plots. The adjacent plot is double width and significantly adds to the size of the site. The additional plot facilitates a much better site arrangement and larger flats with only a marginal increase in numbers. The density of the development is therefore less than the extant approval. The proposals present as 3-storey blocks of contemporary design and form. The outside blocks step down to match the eaves height of adjoining buildings, and the overall height is similar to the approved scheme. The presentation is, however, far superior than the approved scheme. This type of contemporary design has been used successfully elsewhere along Barrack Road. The submitted CGI show how the buildings will sit comfortably on the street with good separation into boundaries. The proposals will represent a significant regeneration enhancement on Barrack Road. The proposals provide attractive buildings beside a landscaped frontage and will be a positive addition to the street scene. In terms of impact on adjacent properties, the plots have similar relationships to the extant scheme. The separation distances and window positions are similar to the extant scheme, and there is no additional impact. The layout of the development meets requirements in terms of access, cycle and bin storage. The proposals result in the closure of a number of access points, thus improving highway safety. The layout also provides good levels of landscaped amenity space around the buildings. A fully detailed and publicly available viability assessment was submitted with the application in line with affordable housing policy requirements. The assessment has been fully scrutinised by the district valuer, who concludes that the scheme is not viable in terms of any return for the developer upon their investment. The unique nature of the applicant allows the delivery of the proposals which will be added to their portfolio of rental properties. Members will be aware that the applicants offer their properties for rent to all sectors of the community. The proposals are a significant improvement over their existing approval, providing much better levels of accommodation and representing a significant enhancement. The applicants respectfully request that members support the officer's recommendation and support a grant of planning permission. There is also a written statement from the ward councillor, Margaret Fitz. There has been great local interest in this application, with many comments mostly being objections. That is why the application has come to committee. Christchurch is a historic town, and I consider this proposal to be contrary to Policy HU2. The architectural style is not in keeping with its surroundings. The visual aspect of this development is 3 massive squares of brick and render with huge areas of glazing, which is nothing like its surroundings at all. Just because there are a few other flats in the area does not justify these massive blocks. In addition, the separation between Block A and number 227 is too small and results in cramming of the scheme onto the available land. It will also give overlook and loss of light to number 227, contrary to Policy H12. The same applies to overlook on other surrounding properties. The amenity space provided for 38 households is much too small and not fit for purpose for so many people who will occupy these blocks. Whilst it is noted that there is ample space for bicycles, there is no doubt that the size of this scheme will generate more car trips on the already busy Barrack Road. Just because there is not enough parking space for all the flats does not mean that an occupant won't have a car. In fact, they probably will. Side roads are already congested with parked cars, and this proposal will only exacerbate that situation. It is said that it is not viable to provide affordable housing. It seems there is an effort to get round this by a Section 106 mechanism to revisit this in the future. This is totally unacceptable in my opinion. If revisited, the answer will be the same as it is now, that the scheme is not viable to include affordable housing. The committee should either address the affordability issue now, or I believe it will not be addressed at all. The Section 106 suggestion is just a get-out clause to facilitate grant of the application. I ask you to refuse this application as contrary to policies H2 and H12 and due to the lack of affordable housing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Holliott. Sophie, is there anything you'd like to come back on what you've heard from any of the deputations?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm that the viability assessment has been independently assessed by the district valuer, and it was concluded that there wasn't any viability for affordable housing. So that this matter has been looked at, and our affordable housing supplementary planning document does give provision for review mechanisms to be used to be able to reassess the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Okay, members, over to members. Who would like to kick off on this one? Anyone? Councillor Pedwin, Councillor Trent and Councillor Hilliard.
Before I come on to comments, which I hope I will later in the meeting, I've just got a few queries on numbers actually in the document. The introduction talks about 21 parking spaces. I could only see 19. So that was one query. The other one, the main one, is the cycle parking, which says 58 cycle spaces, then refers to 34 ground level and 14 upper level. Well, that to me is 48, not 58. So where's the missing 10? So if that could be clarified, please.
Sophie?
Thank you. There was a amendment to the plans, which they didn't have sufficient cycle parking, so they took out a couple of car parking spaces to provide more cycle parking, because considering they didn't need any parking, it was considered that the reduction was acceptable. In terms of numbers of cycle racks, I will have to double check. I don't know if Lee Smith had any comments, but I'll just have to do some counting, if you bear with me.
Sorry, Chair, maybe I can jump in ahead of Sophie there.
Sorry.
Please, Lee.
Yeah, just in terms of the site plan that's on the screen there, if you were to zoom in, there are the ground level cycle parking is effectively just not standard Sheffield stands is 20 cycle spaces, and then in the middle of the cycle rack you can see there, which is sort of cycle stands which are quite tight together. There's 18 cycle spaces in there, so it's 38 altogether. The middle cycle rack, which the cycle stands are closer together, is the systems that you often see at train stations, where the upper bike has an assisted lifting. So when it talks about upper level, it's just the bike gets wheeled in and lifted up to another level. But there is 38 cycle stands altogether there, and then there are some other cycle parking spaces at the front, to front of the building. There's some visitor cycle stores. There's some at the side of the building. So in highway terms, we're satisfied that given the highway gains in the application, etc., the cycle parking provision is acceptable.
So as I understand from what Mr. Smith has just said, it's 38 plus a few in the front. So, I mean, I would like accuracy on numbers. I mean, it may not at all be material to our discussion, but accuracy gives confidence.
Lee, you're muted.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I think if you count the other cycle stores at the front, the what we call visitor cycle stands, it's 50 cycle spaces overall.
50. Thank you. Marion?
So it seems to be, you know, 1 minute it's this number, next minute it's quite a different number. So where are we? As I say, it may not be material to our discussions and our decision, but
No.
But it doesn't engender confidence in me in the report, I'm afraid.
I think the issue here is that in trying to get the application obviously to a position, we often get revised plans that come in over the period of the application, and obviously the officer's report is written at a certain time, but we still have other revised plans that come in during that process. So that's why sometimes you get a slightly different figure in the officer's report in terms of matters like this. Thank you.
Comment. Marion?
We are where we are. Sorry, we are where we are, but I'm not satisfied, but I don't know that there's much we can do at this stage.
Okay.
Sorry, Chairman, I agree with Councillor Pedwin on this one, and I'm wondering if we can delay this application for an hour, perhaps deal with the next one and come back to it, so that the planning officers can update their figures and get the facts straight before we have to look at it.
I think if we allow them to do that while we're still carrying on discussing it, there's no need to delay it, but one of the officers can check that while we're still carrying on discussing it.
It's a little bit difficult discussing it when you haven't quite got confidence.
I think that we're talking cycle stands, Councillor Stribley, and I don't think the cycle stands are the end of the world. We can carry on and we can come back to the cycle provision afterwards, I think. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There are a couple of things which stood out from this application. One of them is a slightly peculiar one to deal with, which is the affordable housing, bearing in mind the applicant and the nature of the housing that's likely to be provided. But I've got a concern, much as the previous speaker, on the parking thing. I initially counted up 18, I recounted it, and it is 19 spaces that I can see on the plan. Of those spaces, there are 2 disabled spaces and 3 marked E, which I assume mean they're for electric cars with charging points. If you counted those as extra needs, you've actually got 14 spaces to cover 18 2-bedroom flats and the best part of 20 1-bedroom flats. That is way below any reasonable level of parking and doesn't cater for the thing at all. And I know there's some argument over the numbers and the report says different numbers, but what we've got in front of us is a plan and an explanation of how the 19 spaces are achieved. So I would regard that as totally inadequate. And there's a point made in one of the reports regarding is something like this likely to cause a problem? Because I was at a briefing a couple of days ago on a plan to put in a cycleway next to a main road here with lots of individual bungalows, and we had to spend some time talking about how to properties that are used more, there would need to have to be special treatment to aid visibility. And here you have, instead of individual houses, which I think quoting from the other day, you know, someone would go in and out once a day and they would know exactly what's going on. But actually having 3 blocks of flats with vehicles discharging from that, and the possibility that there'll be other people like deliverers and things like that thinking, where on earth do I park? To me, it is totally inadequate. And, you know, I think a point also missing from this is so many people have home deliveries. How on earth do they get those deliveries if they're on a main road and there's limited parking there? It seems to me that it's just totally wrong. It's premature for the changes which are happening in terms of the infrastructure. And as I say, it is providing an inadequate level of parking, and I think it's totally unsatisfactory.
Councillor Trent, the parking provision with this one does meet the council's own parking SPD policy. So there is no issue with the parking provision there. You say about the electric spaces taking up part of the parking. They form part of the parking. Just because it says E, it's not necessarily, doesn't mean that anyone that doesn't have an electric vehicle can't park there. They're there marked as E to point out to people that they are for electric cars if somebody needs to take them. So the parking provision is what is right for the SPD on this application.
Well, I'm not aware of what the SPD is.
Then maybe you should read your paperwork, Councillor Trent, because it's clearly stated in all applications that the SPD is there to be read, and zones A and B don't require parking, and this actually has more parking than is actually required under the SPD.
Well, I think that's an unrealistic SPD, quite
Well,
frankly.
that may be the case, but that is what we work to on this planning board, Councillor Trent. Sophie, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to reiterate what you've said about the SPD, that is our policy. This development could have 0 parking, given the Zone B and the 1 and 2 bed flats. So, like you said, they are over providing the parking, but given the extant permission and the existing parking on site, we're happy with it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just saw something come up in the chat there, Sophie. Could you just confirm the cycle spaces and parking spaces, please?
Yeah, so I've got emails confirming, yeah, we've got 58 spaces with the Sheffield stands, the 2-tier Joster cycle stands at the back, and the visitor cycle parking. There is a proposed condition, if you look at number, sorry, bear with me. Sorry, I just can't find the number now. Condition 6, asking for additional details of all the 3 cycle stores. So we'll have control over the exact details of all of that, but we're happy that 58 spaces are being provided, and that is sufficient to serve the development. So I hope that satisfies everybody.
Thank you, Sophie. Councillor Hilliard, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. First of all, for the planning officer, the extant permission, obviously you said it was a smaller site. Could you just confirm the overlooking to the back and sides from that existing permission, please, compared to what we have before us now? Yeah, that's it. So the distances to the back and sides, and if there's, because those pictures don't just show the front windows, is there back windows and balconies?
Yeah, there are rear windows on the back of them. If I just scroll down to, you can see the blue line on this site plan, and that's the footprint of the extant permission of the block. So you can see in terms of the rear, it's of a similar distance. It's clear that there are larger glazing elements on this more contemporary design. There's no getting away from that, but we consider this urban area and the distances are still considered to be acceptable.
Okay, thanks for that. And with regards to the highways officer, please, obviously it is talking about 34 units and the car movements associated to that. When we considered the police station site along, yes, admittedly it is more properties going up, but we had left turn only. Has that been considered because of Barrett Road being so busy? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, it's 38 flats, just to clarify. It's not, in terms of the right or left turn only on this site, we don't consider it's necessary. Both accesses are fairly standard accesses into the site, and I think as highlighted in the report, given the existing significant movements that could occur with the car sales, there are 8 existing accesses we consider as a highway again with just 2 standard accesses into the site compared with the existing traffic flows that could be generated from the existing businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a last follow on. I know in the highways comments it was talking about a right turning for Somerset Road and also to move the bus stop. But I couldn't actually see conditions to those. Have I missed that? Thank you.
Condition 10, which I think on the addendum sheet does refer to, condition 10 should refer to Somerset Road and not Burnett Avenue. Slight wording change. Just with regards to the bus stop at the front of the site, it's not actually being relocated per se, as in hundreds of metres away, etc. It needs some amendments to the raised curbs because of one of the accesses, so it'll just be moving a couple of feet at the most. But condition, I believe it's condition 10 that refers to those works.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Bartlett, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a lot of comments about the lack of parking, but interestingly, the report says that the over provision of parking is considered to be acceptable. I've not actually heard it expressed in that way before, because I don't think there are any objections to having more parking than the minimum required, if you see what I mean. But yeah, and I agree that actually there will be an issue about parking in the locality because of this, but this has got nothing to do, of course, with this application. It is the SPD, it is the policy that we have to adhere to. So from that perspective, it is, of course, acceptable. And for those that don't think it's the policy is correct, I suggest that they write to their local ward councillors and flag this up to them. In terms of the design, I quite like the previous extant consent, but having said that, the fact that there are 3 blocks adjacent to each other with a flat roof design, I think that then becomes acceptable because it is such a long stretch, and I think it will look quite nice. Although I personally like pitched roofs in that particular area, but you know, I think it is acceptable. In terms of affordable housing, it's a very interesting comment there, but of course we need to remember that, and I think it was stated by I think it was Mr. Parks, that you know this company does provide housing to all types of tenancy across the conurbation, has done for years. And actually, without the provision of housing that they put, you know, we'd have a lot more people on the social housing list if it weren't for them. So to a point, we actually are quite indebted to this organisation. And I'm pretty certain that you know, this will be helpful in terms of meeting our housing needs in particular. So I think it is welcome from that respect. I just got one point for clarification, and that is, there was a comment about the overlooking on the care home. I'm not sure what end of that block it is, on the corner, I presume. And I'd just like Sophie to explain if there is an issue there. I do accept that separation distances will make a difference, but nevertheless, if there's an oppressive, overbearing outlook for residents, then that could be an issue. But so from my perspective, I believe that's probably the only issue that I'd be looking for clarification on. Thank you.
Sophie, would you like to respond to that, please?
Yes, thank you. You can see the street scene at the top, and this is the building number 213. So you can see that they've got their access driveway along the side boundary. From the photo montage below, you can see the 3rd story's been set back off the boundary, and there are no proposed windows on the ground and 1st floor level. So this combination, I consider it to be acceptable in terms of overlooking or loss of privacy on the impact on the occupiers of these rooms up here. Thank you. Is that sufficient?
Yeah. Thank you, Sophie. Councillor Stribley, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I visited this site, colleague, on Tuesday morning. I didn't like what's proposed, but it certainly will be a huge improvement on what is there at the moment. And I can't see many planning grounds for its refusal, but I do have one or two concerns. It's been said there is the opportunity for some soft landscaping. Well, on one of the pictures, we saw really quite nice front landscaping. And I do think there should be a very careful and strong condition, not only on the provision of the initial landscaping, but its maintenance and retention for the future, as these apartments are not for sale, they're for rent and will remain under the control of the same landlord. So that ought not to be a problem. Balconies at first floor or above to the rear, or floor to ceiling windows to the rear, and it's very difficult to see on the pictures from this distance, I believe should be obscure glazed at up to what is normal sill height, because if they are simply glass floor to ceiling, the window inside, people can sit in and look out down into the neighbouring garden. They can look out and have a distant view if it's obscure to what we would normally call sill height or table height. Then you don't have that view down unless you wish to stand directly at the window, which you can do briefly, and that happens in effect in every property in the conurbation. You can go and look out of your bedroom window into your neighbour's back garden, but if you do it for more than 10 seconds a day, it's quite remarkable. It's the ability to sit there and just constantly observe the neighbours that can be a problem. So I'd like some assurance that the balconies at the rear are obscure glazed, or if there are no balconies, tulip balconies, or the bottom of the windows are obscured. I agree on the parking provision, but I also agree with other colleagues. I personally don't like the current SPD that we have. Well, it's not so much the SPD as the zones that are suddenly granted to it, because in the absolute town centre, yes, possibly down the high street, you can do without the parking provision. But when you're getting to the peripheries, that is quite different. And we know how people still love their personal transport, whether it's a car, a mobility scooter, or whatever else it is. I believe it's tighter than it needs to be on the western edge. That left-hand block looks very tight to its neighbouring properties, but I accept that there is probably very little overlooking. And there was reference to the care home on the eastern edge. I would be surprised if it's still a care home. It looks so sad and neglected and tired, and very dingy net curtains, that I would be astonished if it's still an active care home. But maybe it is. Perhaps I'm wrong with that one. I really don't like it, but I'm struggling to find a planning reason to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. Sophie, could you come back regarding the windows, please?
Thank you. Just to confirm, was it just the balconies that you wish to be obscured rather than the windows at the back?
Floor to ceiling windows at the back. If they're ordinary windows, that's fine, because you actually got to, if you're sitting in the room, you can't see straight down into the neighbour's garden. But if they're floor to ceiling at the back, then I would like the bottom part to be obscure glazed if possible. First floor and above. I said yes.
Okay, so
that's the possibility of looking down into the neighbouring garden.
I mean, looking at this rear of Block C, obviously these two have got balconies, and it's only this one and these ones that are not full height. Whether it would be reasonable to kind of obscure the rear parts of this when you've got a balcony. I'm not sure that would negate.
If there is a balcony, then it's only the balcony that needs to be obscure glazed. If there is no balcony, just a window, then it's not, so that anybody sitting in the room can't sit and peer directly down into the neighbouring garden. That's my only concern.
Okay, from my point of view, I don't think it's necessary because I've made an assessment that I think the impact on amenities is acceptable. Members will have to make a decision whether they want that condition imposed. I don't know if Mr. Firth has got any comments on the reasonableness of that condition.
Mr. Firth?
Sorry, Chairman, I was just checking something else. Could you repeat the condition in question? I'll make a comment.
It's just whether we can obscure the lower panes of the first and second floor level of the windows at the back, or the screening on the balconies to prevent kind of looking down into gardens. My view is I think I'm accepting of the impact, but I just wondered whether you thought it was a reasonable condition.
Chairman, unfortunately, I think that is very much a matter of planning judgment rather than legal judgment. You can obviously impose conditions that cover obscure glazing in appropriate circumstances. I think the problem as members you face is you've got clear guidance from your officer as to their professional view. Doesn't mean you can't depart from it, but obviously there's a risk associated with you departing from it if it turns out not to be justifiable. I don't think I can say much else really, because as a legal principle it's possible, but it is a planning view that you would be required to be able to justify if it went to appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Firth. I'll go to Councillor Bartlett quickly.
Thank you. I think, you know, the separation distances are probably meet the normal requirements in that regard to looking at the rear view. Chairman, I would like to move to recommend the granting in accordance with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we do that, I'll carry on with speakers. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chairman. Well,
microphone, please, Councillor Hall.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, to my mind, it's still overdevelopment. It's not a very pleasant sight seeing the flat roofs, but also it's a very busy road. There's at least 30,000 or more than 30,000 vehicle movements a day. And there is a proposal that we put a double cycle lane that length. And to me, with a double cycle lane, we're going to lose any on-street parking that's there. And the side roads are all chock-a-block already with parking. So there is a problem, although it meets our criteria, in reality, it's far short of it. And also, because I think the main thing to me is that when they purchased the site, they knew full well that our plans quite clearly state that we need 40% affordable. And although the district value agrees that it's not viable, to me, I don't think that's the right reason. I think that if we got a plan that said 40% should be delivered wherever possible. And I think it could have been made possible on this site. So I won't be able to support this, but I do think that when you've got planning reasons, the ward council made it very clear and stated quite clearly the policies that would be used to refuse it. So there are reasons, and there's standard policies that exist that would give us reason to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to second Councillor Bartlett's move. He said pretty much everything that I wanted to say. I agree with him on everything here. Regarding the balcony, I think he is also right. The separation distances is more than enough to negate any possibility of harm from that. I think I would have had a different view if there was more private amenity space to the flats themselves. I think in that case, then I might have wanted some obscure glazing. But I think, given that it's just generic amenity space, I don't think it's necessary. You know, we've been over the parking a million times, so I won't say anything more there. The only other thing I'd like to just to air out is something that was mentioned in one of the objectors' deputations regarding flats on this site as a general principle. Well, in terms of the committee, our hands are tied on that one in terms of the extant permission, which is already established that flats are acceptable on this site. And so really, I don't think we have any other decision. So I will happily second Councillor Bartlett's move to grant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Pedderman. Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. I'm struggling with this one as well, like Councillor Stribley and I think others. There are some good features as compared with the previous, the extant plans. Normally, we wouldn't consider the previous plans for comparison, but in this case, it is quite possible, if not probable or likely, that the extra plans would be enacted if we were to refuse this one. So I think comparison in this case is valid. And design wise, I totally agree that I don't like the square boxy particularly in that context, in that environment. The previous designs with the pitched roofs look more fitting in that environment. On the other hand, a good thing is that they have increased the number of 2-bed flats in comparison to the 1-bed flats. I'm very concerned that we are building or allowing so many 1-bed flats to be built, and I wonder if we've reached saturation on the need for 1-bed flats, so to have a bigger number of bigger flats. On the other hand, the report makes clear that the demand is actually for houses, not flats, 2- and 3-bed houses. And a big site like this would provide quite a number of houses, probably nowhere near as profitable, but they would be much better in context. But we've got to look at the plans as they are. But again, as practically all speakers have referred, the question of affordable housing. And I'm wondering, I don't know whether this is appropriate or not, we've got the chair of overview and scrutiny here. Is it time that there was some overview and scrutiny of the district valuer and his decisions, his or her or their decisions? So that's a request to the chair of overview and scrutiny to take that on board, please. On the whole, I think I'm going to have to support this. I'm not happy. I don't see the need for Juliet balconies because there's not really overlooking of neighbouring gardens, possibly the care home, possibly 227, but it's difficult to tell from the plans what amenity spaces would be involved. At the back, there's a big separation distance with masses of car parking in the middle. So, you know, who's going to want to sit and look at the car park? So I don't think there'll be overview of the gardens behind. It's far too far away. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Pittman. Councillor Bartley, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I apologise to the other members about making the move at the point that I did, because I didn't realise there were other people that hadn't spoken that had requested to. I hadn't noted that, so I'm sorry about that. But having heard everybody else's comments, I do not change my opinion, but I would just like to comment on the viability issue about affordable housing, because, of course, affordable housing is subject to viability assessment, and if this is agreed as being a proper assessment of viability by the planning officers, and I have to say a lot more attention is now being paid to those viability assessments by the planning department, then if the viability is seen to be a valid assessment, then it no longer becomes a material reason for objection for the application. You know, that's the fact of the matter. You can't object to no affordable housing if it's met the requirements for the process of assessing it. So, but as I said, you know, this particular applicant does meet all types of tenancy, and I'm sure that it will contribute greatly to meeting the housing needs that we've got for all types of tenancies. So I think we need to bear that in mind. But in terms of the changes that have been suggested, there's always a danger that if you offer changes at the last minute, it could be subject to the rule of unintended consequences. Not really understand it, because we have to give credit to the architects here who do consider all of this in their designs, and as the planning officers do when they assess it themselves. I do understand the issues about overlooking that, but you know, if you do have good separation distances, then that generally does overcome those. So my view doesn't change, Chair. I still move in accordance with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. I agree with you on a lot of what you said there. Personally, I did prefer the previous properties that would have been there, but I think, as you said earlier in the debate, having the 3 of them there sort of counteracts that, because if it had just been one block, it would have looked totally out of keeping. But when you've got 3, you're taking up a much wider part of the street scene, so therefore they do tend to blend in quite nicely with the actual rest of the street scene. So I will support your move, Councillor Bartlett, and thank you for that. So, Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment
that I don't see what the applicants have done elsewhere as something we should consider, to be honest. I know they're very big landlords and do good housing and good landlords and that, but we shouldn't give them preferential treatment, I don't feel, on any application, because it shouldn't be who applies for it, it's what's applied for. Having said that, I'm happy and I will be supporting the move.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Brown. We can't pick them out just because of who they are, and I fully support you on that. I think possibly what Councillor Bartlett was trying to say was that they do tend nowadays, as against their previous work, provide some better quality accommodation, and I think that these will be better quality and will be suitable for the area. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Barron's right. It's the application, not the applicant, we should be considering. And of course, that's what we're doing. Yeah. My main concern with this is the volume of traffic on that road is already very heavy, but with the extant permission, we're rather stuck. As Councillor Johnson said, we're our hands are tied behind our backs, so we're not much we can do about that. I imagine in the future we'll be arguing about too many parking spaces on other applications, but
very possible.
Chair, could I just come back?
Yeah.
So just to clarify that in no way did I intend that this applicant should be receiving any preferential treatment. My move is based purely on the aspects of the application itself, not who's making it.
Yeah.
The reason I made the comment that I did is because of the issue over affordable housing and the effect that we do need to house people, and this particular company does offer services for all types of tenancy. That's the only implication that I meant to. Yes,
guys, I don't want to go through a backwards and forwards argument on this, so keep it brief, please, and then we're moving on.
I will do. Thank you, Chair. In no way have I questioned your integrity.
Thank you for that, everyone. Okay, so we have a move to grant this application. I'm fully happy with that move and the reasons for it being made. And it's seconded by Councillor Johnson. I'll call names in turns, if I may. Myself, Councillor Kelsey, I am for the application. Councillor Johnson?
For.
Councillor Bartlett?
For.
Councillor Barron?
For.
Councillor Bull?
For.
Councillor Davies?
For.
Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Hilliard?
For.
Councillor Pedevin?
Reluctantly for.
Councillor Stribley?
Also reluctantly for.
Councillor Trent?
Against.
And Councillor Borthwick?
For.
Could we have the numbers, please, Ms. Hilliard?
Thanks, Chairman. That's 10 votes in favour and 2 against, so that application is granted.
So therefore that application is granted as stated. Thank you very much, Sophie, for your presentation this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Of course it can, Councillor Hall. No problem. So moving on, members, we will now move on to the second item on the agenda today, which is 6B to 40 Evelyn Road. And that is going to be presented to us by Mr. Hubbard. Mr. Hubbard, if you'd like to prepare your screen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you can see that.
We can, thank you, Mr. Hubbard.
Okay, good morning, members. This application relates to 40 Evelyn Road in Bournemouth. The proposal is an outline application for the demolition of the existing building and erection of a single and 2-storey block of 5 flats, together with associated parking and access. The description says it's a revised scheme because there have been 2 previous similar applications on the site, one of which was withdrawn and the most recent one was refused. The outline application in this case relates to matters of access, layout and scale. So appearance and landscaping are reserved matters. This slide shows the location in the context of the BCP area. You can see it's in Moordown in North Bournemouth here. It's on a corner plot with Coronation Avenue. You can see it's a wide plot at the front and it tapers to the rear of the site. So again, from the aerial image, you can see that width of the plot at the front and it tapers to the rear. The area is sort of mainly characterised by detached dwellings, although there are some semi-detached properties. Some of these properties, but not many, have been converted to flats. The application site itself contains 2 one-bed flats. Purpose-built blocks of flats are not that common, though they do exist. For example, there's a block of 5 flats at the other end of Evelyn Road, towards Malvern Road, number 103. The fact that this site contains 2 flats means there's the loss of this building. There's no loss of family dwelling house, so there's no policy concern in that respect. Here are some street scene photos. The application site is the white rendered property here and here. You can see there's a common 2-storey scale of properties, although there is some variation in design and appearance. Some more street scene photos. At the top, this is the junction with Coronation Avenue, so this is the application site here on the corner. And then on the bottom, we're a bit further north on Evelyn Road, so you can see just about the application site here, and it's mainly to illustrate sort of the mix of properties here. And some photos of the site itself. You can see here we're at the rear of the site. The neighbouring property has got some first floor windows, bedroom windows facing to the rear and facing the site itself. And then at the bottom, you can see the front of the site is wider, and again, it tapers at the back. So moving on to the plans, this is the proposed site plan. You can see the footprint of the building is greater than that of the existing, which is shown in red. The main 2-storey part of the building at the front of the site, it retains a sufficient gap to the street on the corner here. The rear section is a bit closer to the road, but it's a 1-storey element. There's also no particular building line here in this part of Coronation Avenue because the next building is quite a long way up to the off the end here. So this is the, oh sorry, I'll just go back and show you there's 2 car parking spaces proposed on the site at the rear here. One of the main areas of public objection relates to the amount of parking, but the level of parking in this case is greater than that which is required in the parking standards SPD. It's in a Zone B location close to Wimborne Road, and which is a key transport route in the district centre of Moordown, so it doesn't actually require parking for small flats in this location. There's also quite a long length of unrestricted parking along this part of Coronation Avenue in any case. So the floor plans show 5 one-bedroom flats. They are an acceptable size, and they replace the 2 one-bedroom flats that are on the site already. So one of the other main areas of public objection is that this is an area which contains mainly family dwellings. So local residents consider that flats are out of keeping in principle. However, it would not, as I said, result in a loss of a family dwelling on the site because there's flats on there at the moment. The principle is accepted. The intensity of use of the site could be a consideration, and the previous applications did involve concerns in terms of both the size of the building and the numbers of flats. But in this case, 5 flats on a large corner site would not create a noticeable increase in the level of activity on the site, or at least to such an extent that would harm the character of the area, in my view. And the building's design is a little less overtly a block of flats too, so it will sort of mix in with the area. So as you can see, the proposed elevations show a fully 2-storey building with a hipped roof, so there's no accommodation in the roof space. That has overcome previous concerns in this respect. And the appearance, as you can see from the front, is generally sort of a pair of semi-detached houses. So it's quite similar to the ones further up the street. And then at the rear, it drops down to a 1-storey element with a flat at the rear. And this helps to reduce the impact on the neighbouring property at 42. So this is the street scene from the front at the top and then at the side at the bottom. You can see again the eaves height is generally matches in with the other properties in the area. The ridge is a little higher than the immediate neighbour, but this is because it's a wider building, similar to the semi-detached pair further up the street. The important thing is it does retain that fully hipped roof form, and it's on a corner plot where you might expect a slightly larger building in any case. And then finally, a CGI showing the proposed development. Although appearance is a reserved matter, it shows you how the traditional design approach and materials will help integrate it further with the area. So overall, I've made an assessment of the proposals in full in my report, and I consider that it has overcome the previous reasons for refusal on the last application, and it will integrate into the area in an acceptable manner. So I've recommended the application for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Ms. Holyoake, could we have any statements, please?
Thank you, Chairman. A first objection from Tony Moore based on the following material considerations. 1. Previous planning applications. This is the 4th iteration of the proposed development of this property. All iterations except revision C were unanimously objected to by residents. Revision C was for the restoration of the existing detached dwelling, with an additional smaller detached house being built adjacent to it. And so, unsurprisingly, this revision attracted hardly any interest from residents. Residents are unhappy that multiple attempts to achieve the developer's goals are being lodged. The council should be aware that not all objections have been submitted, because some residents are not able to use the BCP planning internet portal, and the COVID lockdowns have prevented these people from attending council offices. 2. Parking. The residents have unanimously objected to the proposed parking arrangements due to insufficient spaces and the increase in roadside parking in what is already a very congested junction and busy road. The area is home to many small business owners, many with tradesmen's type vans and trucks that are parked overnight and weekends. 3. Highway safety and traffic. A few yards from the site, a road traffic accident, a child fatality, and this is still in the residents' minds and features heavily in their objections to each iteration, except C. Note the area is very busy with young school children and road traffic twice a day. Another fatality would be horrific. The area is an intersection of Coronation Avenue, Evelyn Road and Limited Road that creates at least 2 blind junctions which are likely to become more treacherous if the proposed development goes ahead. 4. Design, appearance and materials. The neighbouring dwellings are predominantly detached family homes. The proposed development is not in keeping with the street scene or housing type in any way. 5. Overlooking, loss of privacy and loss of light or overshadowing. The residents of 42 Evelyn Road have clearly stated their objections to construction of flats due to loss of their privacy and overlooking their property, amongst other factors. 6. Government policy. BCP core strategy, the Sustainable Community Strategy, discusses the need for a balanced stock of housing types and discusses the risks associated with developers building too many flats. Family homes with community and quality become irreversibly lost when this type of development proceeds. 7. Green recycling CO2. Demolition of a perfectly good home is in principle not in keeping with modern eco-friendly green principles as highlighted by REBA. 8. COVID. In the post-COVID world, ways of working have changed forever and many people now need their own space to live and work. Shoehorning 5 flats into a corner plot will not afford the residents quality space needed to grow and live. And 9. Utilities. Increased burden on drainage and other utilities. Second objection from Tim Phillips. I would like to strongly object to this application. As the direct adjoining neighbour, it would negatively impact my property and family's well-being on many levels. First, it would have an adverse effect on the light into our living spaces. Our main source of light into our living space would be blocked by the increase in footprint, blocking out light to both our skylight and side window. These are the only sources of natural light into our living room. It would also reduce light into my daughter's bedroom on the first floor. These are some of the reasons why it would also have a negative effect on our property's value. The size and density of the property are in no way in keeping with the area of residential houses and appears to be a way of cramming as much as possible into a small site for profit rather than the community. The negative effect on parking in the area would certainly increase the danger too, especially as this is a main walkthrough for 3 local schools, as would evidence by visiting the site at any pre or post school times. Unfortunately, the road parking less than 100 metres from this site was tragically a cause for a 5-year-old child losing their life a few years ago. With the location of the plot being within 25 metres of 2 blind corner junctions, it would be extremely dangerous to increase any on-road parking, which this proposal would certainly add 5 flats and 2 parking spaces. The safety of the community, in my opinion, and the increase in risk should itself be an important enough reason not to increase the resident numbers on this site. The reduction in green space on the site would have a negative effect on the potential residents too. We have had to endure numerous proposals of extremely similar plans only for them to be withdrawn, amended or refused. As a direct neighbour, I was once again surprised I was not notified of this objection process directly and was only made aware of it by a neighbour, hence the delayed response. The Council's rejection of the previous plan lists points which once again relate to this, and therefore I cannot understand why it is being considered. With COVID playing a big part in local residents who do not have access to the internet to voice their concerns. I have had several neighbours state that they cannot voice their concerns and therefore the true number of objections are much higher. The small development proposal of an additional house has received little or no objections, but perhaps this is not the profit opportunity of this plan. And there's a statement in support from Matt Holmes, agent for the applicant. Members, this application seeks outline planning permission for the construction of a block of 5 flats. The application was submitted in positive response to the authority's decision on an earlier planning application for 6 flats, following which we have reduced the size of the building to better reflect the street scene of Evelyn Road. We are pleased to note that the recommendation before you is one of approval. The application site is located in an accessible location on a residential street. It is a corner plot and has a wider frontage than the majority of the surrounding sites. The immediate area is characterised by a mix of houses and low-rise apartment blocks, and the Wimborne Road local centre is close by. This is therefore a suitable and sustainable location for new homes to be provided. The existing building on the site is already arranged as 2 flats. The proposals would replace those 2 flats with a block of 5 flats and make a better use of the site. We have been careful when designing the scheme to ensure that the proposals will respond positively to the character of the area. To that end, the building has been designed to reflect the height of buildings on Evelyn Road. The building reduces in width towards the rear in order to follow the shape of the plot. It also reduces to a single-storey height at the rear in order to limit the overall bulk of the building. On its front elevation, the scale and bulk of the building reflects that of a pair of semi-detached houses, of which there are examples already on both Evelyn Road and Coronation Avenue. The design and massing of the block, and in particular its stepping down to a single storey at the rear, ensures that the amenities of the adjacent property will be preserved. Although this is an outline application, we have submitted detailed plans of the building, and your officer's report considers that the design shown is appropriate. The detailed designs will follow at the reserved matter stage. The application also includes space for landscaping to the rear, side and to the front, side and rear of the building. Details of the proposed landscaping will be agreed at the reserved matters stage. In terms of parking, the application exceeds the parking standards for this location, where no car parking would be required under the Council's Car Parking Standards SPD. This application instead proposes to provide 2 spaces, which exceeds the adopted standards, but strikes an appropriate balance between providing car parking and also ensuring that landscaping space is appropriate. We have also provided cycle parking on the site. Accordingly, I would ask that you grant planning permission. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms Holliott. We have no deputations from ward councillors on this one, so I'll come straight to members. Councillor Bull.
Thank you, Chair. I know this corner quite well. I often travel along Coronation Road there, and it's quite it's an unpleasant corner to have to tackle, and I have concerns around the highway safety. As we have Mr. Smith, is he able to comment on that?
I'm not sure he's still with us at the moment. Is Mr. Smith still with us on this call, please, Tom?
I don't think he is, I'm afraid. He was here for the Barrack Road application.
Thank you.
Oh, that's a shame. It is an unpleasant corner at the best of times, and I am concerned that the extra traffic, although fairly minimal, but right on the corner there, will increase that risk there. We've already heard of the tragic incident that happened a few years ago.
Yeah, the highway officer has assessed it in terms of the highway safety. They are content that the parking is a sufficient distance from the junction, and it's got adequate visibility displays. So they raised no objection in terms of highway safety.
Yeah, they're the experts, but I still have my concerns about that. Other point, the notification was raised, and that's an issue we debate every now and again about how residents and neighbours are notified of developments. It's quite unsatisfactory. A bit of paper on a lamppost, but that's not for us to discuss at this point. My other issues are with the amenity for the neighbours, the immediate neighbours to the right. Other than that, I'm content, but I'm not sure. I listened to the debate, but the highway safety is a big matter for me.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Any further comments? Councillor Davies first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think previously in the last one we heard, one of our members say that, we'd been saturated with one-bedroom flats. And again, this is for 5 one-bedroom flats. I've had an experience only this week. A resident contacted me. Sadly, the business that he manages is going to close on the last day of this year. He's got a family. He needs a 3-bedroom flat, and he's said that they really are struggling. And he asked me if I could help. I spoke to a couple of landlords, and both of them said, if there was a developer that could just build a block of 3-bedroom flats, I would bite the hand off them, because they said we just haven't got that capability. We realise that we need family homes, but it's nothing but 1-bedroom flats that are being developed around the town. And it's left the guy that's he's a Bournemouth a man or a Bournemouth family, but saying that he may well have to move away. He's got the opportunity of another job, but he said if I haven't got accommodation, then we may well have to move away. So I'm afraid that I can't support this. I think we've got to really dig in now and send the message out that it's family homes that we need, not just constantly one-bedroom flats.
Thank you. I'm taking that point, but actually my question was based on I think it was the second objection, that the neighbours, the immediate neighbours, talking about overlooking and overbearing. I'm wondering if Mr. Hubbard can confirm whether the dimensions of the 2-storey section of the proposal is the same or bigger or smaller than the current house. Is it higher? It appears from the map, from the plan, that it's not nearer the boundary, so confirmation of that. As regards windows, there didn't seem to be any issue with windows overlooking, so it's just the dimensions. Oh, sorry, there's another question as well, totally different. Down the side border, between the whether you go into the bin store and the parking areas, that appears to have been left with no boundary treatment, which I would have thought was odd. People would be able to walk onto the grass and into the one bedroom flat from there. But that may be just where the CGI has done it, but I would have thought there should be some boundary treatment there.
Thank you. The site plan on the screen at the moment, yes, shows the outline of the existing building in red. This wing bit at the rear is single story, and the main sort of rectangular shape is the 2-story bit. The main area of building is 2-story, then it steps in, and there's a stairwell which comes to about here where this hedging is shown. You can probably see it more clearly here. You can see the stairs go up to 2-story, and then it drops down to single story. So on the site plan, that comes to about here. So it's a little bit deeper in terms of the 2-story element. You can see, I don't know how clear it is on your screens, but they have shown the side facing window here, which would just about face the single story element. And then there's a rear facing bedroom, which when you sort of work out the 45-degree angles, it doesn't intersect the 2-story element. So in terms of the impact on those windows, I consider that there was a sufficient gap, and the height of this single story element was sufficient to ensure that they had a sort of still a sufficient view of the sky, as it were. The other element about the boundary treatments, well, this doesn't show boundary treatments, but again, it's an outline application with appearance and landscaping reserved. So I agree that there should be some boundary treatment along there, but it's just not shown at the moment because we don't have that level of detail.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Councillor Le Pen.
That didn't actually answer my question. My question was about the height and the depth of the 2-story element of the proposal. I appreciate there's the 1-story element behind, which I don't think would be a problem for the neighbours, but the 2-story, they were saying it was going to be overbearing or cut out light. Is it going to be any bigger, higher, deeper than the current?
It's as high as it's a little bit higher than the existing in terms of the ridge of the roof, but it retains that hip roof. And in terms of the depth of the 2-story, yes, it is a little bit deeper, probably a metre or 2 deeper along this side boundary, but no closer to the boundary.
Thank
you. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding, would we be able to condition to restrict permitted development rights, in particular on the back and in the roof? Thank you.
It's a block of flats rather than a dwelling house, so they wouldn't have any permitted development rights.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So follow. The other question was, it says outline permission. So how, in theory, how could they change the design? The deputy edition said they wouldn't, but because it's outline, could they? Thank you.
Well, they could potentially change the design, but they're restricted by the floor plan that they've got and the layout that they've got. So it's very unlikely, I consider, that the design would change away from the traditional appearance, because we wouldn't probably accept that anyway, given the character of the area.
Thank you. Councillor Borsett.
Yes, I do know this area. It's quite a residential area. It's usual problem, residential parking, which narrows the road. But this junction is quite a reasonable sized junction. And in my time knowing it, I've never thought that type of road would incur any problems regarding driving, because there's such short roads just there. I can't see any road, but I do support the previous speakers' concerns on two bedroom flats and 1 bedroom flats. I only wish that I got on with them, that we had that 2-bedroom accommodation instead of all singles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding the point about 1 bedroom versus 3 bedroom, of course, whilst we do need 3 bedroom, we also need 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms. So you can't really put a material objection into the fact that it's not 3 bedroom, because we still need 1 or 2 bedrooms. Again, parking has got to come up, I'm afraid, because whilst without the new SPD, this development would not have been able to go ahead as it's currently designed, because it would have required 5 on-site parking spaces. Now, it does comply with the parking SPD. In fact, there's no over provision of parking. But what you get here, and whilst in isolation, this is compliant and it's acceptable in planning terms for this development, what you're actually seeing is a cumulative effect in the area of developments where progressively the additional parking is taken up on the highways. In this particular area of the town, it's always problematical parking on the highways anyway. And where you are near a school, as this property is, it becomes even more of an issue in terms of safety implications. So whilst taking this particular development in isolation, you'd probably say it's okay. If you then look at it in the context of the development of the area generally, it does progressively start to introduce additional or exacerbate safety issues, particularly in school areas. And so I do have those concerns, but having said that, there are no material objections that I can bring to actually object to this application. But it does keep coming back to this SPD, and I think we generally need to look at it again. I accept this not the responsibility of this committee, but it is something we need to look at, and I will support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. Although I'm not sure how material it is in this, one of the objections was to do with loss of light. If you turn the plan round so that south is in front of you, and then you imagine the way the sun moves, the effect on 38, probably not with the building at a similar height, but the effect on 38 of shading is quite significant. And I wonder whether, as part of the plans presented, that there ought to be something suitably readable that actually shows the light and shade stuff. I certainly know that there are programs available, because when I inherited my son's old computer, and he was working as an architect at the time, there was a program on it which unfortunately had expired, which would calculate the effect of the effect of the angle of the sun on sort of property. And as I say, if you turned it round, and I've got it on, I've got a copy on paper, so it's obviously easier for me to do there. You can actually see how any increase in mass on number 40 would adversely affect number 38. As I say, I think it's probably marginal on what's proposed, but it is something that we ought to have a bit more information on. So that's just a general point, but I do have sympathy with the point raised.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Any further comments from any members? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I have to agree with a lot of what Councillor Bartlett has said. We will talk about the SPD on every single application that comes before us at the moment, because clearly members are not happy, but unfortunately we have to deal with that as it is. In terms of the impact on the area, as far as I'm concerned, the fact that it is designed currently, I'll accept that it is only an outline application, to look like a large dwelling house, I think removes a lot of the negative impact for me. If it was designed to look like a purpose-built block of flats, I'd be far more concerned, because that would be entirely out of keeping. But the fact that it looks like a couple of semi-detached houses or one large detached house, I think removes any visual harm. It is slightly higher than the current building, but given that it's a hip roof with a ridge, I don't see it having a particular amount of harm on the neighbour, especially given that whilst the two-storey element does go further into the back of the site, it's still not as deep, as far as I can read the plans, as the neighbouring property itself. So I don't see the harm being there being particularly particularly strong. So, you know, the road safety concerns are very much legitimate concerns, and I would hope that that this will not happen. I cannot see that it's enough to refuse the application. And just touching on Councillor Davies's point regarding the one bedroom flats, I do agree that we do need larger properties as well, but then trying to cram a few 3-bedroom properties onto this particular plot would be completely untenable. It's too small, and then you would have far more serious traffic concerns. So as far as I'm concerned, I will be supporting it. And if there aren't too many more speakers, Chair, I would propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding the daylight issue, I'm just looking at plan on page 70 here, and obviously the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So number 38 is actually blocking the morning sun from the proposed site. And then the proposed building is blocking some of the sun from number 38 in the afternoon. So I can't really accept that argument, but what I have got is real concerns over the safety. When I did my site visit, I parked in Evelyn Road and I parked just past the site. And when I come around the corner, my instincts when I parked was to put my hazard warning lights on. And I remember doing that because I felt that it was a dangerous corner. We've heard about the tragic death of a young child, which I cannot ignore. I think it's regrettable that the transportation officer isn't here, because I would like to sort of have some more clarity on how he's come to the assumption that extra dwellings there and extra cars won't make that junction potentially more dangerous. So without him here, I'm not going to support this application without more clarity on that safety issue. I just can't. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Barron. Is Alexis with us now?
Hi, Chairman. Simon. I believe Alexis isn't currently on the call, but is available if you want us to buzz him in.
If we could buzz him in, Mr. Gould, that'd be helpful.
Yep, just give us a few moments, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, when people were talking earlier, one of the objectors stated that they hadn't received a notification. Simon has checked that, and he can confirm that notifications were sent to both neighbours, immediate neighbours, and also to the people that were occupying the building at this moment in time. So they have all had notification of the development.
Yeah, hi, Chairman. Trying to get hold of Mr. Edwards at the moment, but
yeah, he's here, Simon.
Oh, he's arrived.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Simon. Good morning, Mr. Edwards.
Hello, Chair.
There's been a couple of questions raised about the safety aspect of this development on the junction there. I wonder if you could go through it. I wonder if Councillor Barron, did you want to repeat your questions, Councillor Barron?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's the increase in traffic that going from 2 flats to 5 flats. You've got single 1-bed flats there that could be occupied by couples which could easily have 2 cars each. So there's going to be an increase in traffic to that junction, and how that's been assessed. And because we just heard of the tragic death of a young child, and I just want some more clarity on that point. Thank you.
Okay. obviously there's only 2 parking spaces shown on the plan there, so only 2 vehicles will be on the site and accessing that quite away from the junction with Evelyn Road, shown on Coronation Avenue, which is an improvement compared to the existing access on Evelyn Road, almost immediately on top of the junction, which is that crossroad style junction. So you've got a clear benefit compared to the existing arrangement there. Now, I know you mentioned the child death, which was on Naseby Road. Obviously, that's a street further over from Evelyn, and from what I understand, that was related to running traffic speeding through the area, which would not be affected, unfortunately, by this development. This development would only generate the parking demand for those 2 spaces, not anymore, because you can't park any more cars on the site. There may be some on-street parking, which goes on like many of the other properties there, but they would all be within a safe distance of the junction.
Councillor Barron?
Yeah, and I presume that the death of the child was on the junction of the application site. That's how I understood it. So I misunderstood that. Thank you for the clarity on that.
No, it was several houses down from the junction on Naseby Road, and it was unfortunately a speeding driver.
Okay, thank you. It's very sad. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Edwards, for that clarification. I think that's actually cleared up quite a few of our minds, because we were all under the impression that the accident had directly outside his property. So I think that's helped clear our minds up slightly. Thank you for that. Appreciate you coming onto the call, Mr. Edwards. So, members, do we have any other comments? If not, I'm going to make a move to grant this one. Have you done one already? I do apologise, Councillor Johnson, stealing your thunder there. I will second your move, and I will ask if there are any other comments that wish to be made at this time regarding that. No? In that case, we will go to the vote. Myself, Councillor Kelsey, I'm for. Councillor Johnson? For. Councillor Bartlett? For. Councillor Barron? For. Councillor Bull? Against. Councillor Davies?
Against.
Councillor Hall?
Against.
Councillor Hilliard?
Against.
Councillor Pedevin?
For.
Councillor Stribley?
For.
Councillor Trent?
Against.
And Councillor Borthwick?
For.
Can we have the numbers, please?
Thank you, Chairman. That is 7 votes in favour and 5 votes against, so that application is granted.
Thank you very much, members, and thank you for the officers for your presentation on that one. I'm now going to call a 5-minute comfort break for everyone. See you back here in 5 minutes sharp, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the Planning Committee meeting. We will now move on to item 6C, which is the land to the rear of 91 The Grove in Christchurch. And I would ask Emma to present her case, please.
Thank you, Chairman.
Good morning, Emma.
Morning. Apologies for that. Can you confirm you can see my presentation?
No, we can't, Emma. You need to, it's not showing on the screen. Yep, we have it now.
Okay, thank you. The application is for a proposed 2-bedroom bungalow to the rear of existing property with private garden, parking, turning, and associated garage. This slide shows the site location plan for the proposed dwelling, which is outlined in red to the rear of number 91. The site is within an established urban residential area, as can be seen in this image. The area is characterized by a mix of detached 2-story houses, chalet bungalows, and bungalows of varying age, scale, and design. The plot sizes in the area also vary, and there are examples of established backyard development in the area as marked in red dots around the image. The proposal involves the subdivision of the existing rear garden of number 91, the Grove, which has already been done by the erection of this 1.8 meter high fence, as can be seen in this photograph. The next slide shows the proposed site plan, showing where the new bungalow would be sited to the bottom garden of number 91. The new unit will be accessed via the existing access drive, which is to the north of number 91, which currently leads up to the detached garage of the host property, which is shown outlined in red, which together with other...
Sorry, Emma, could I just stop you there for a moment?
Yeah.
The view that we can see of your screen is very, very small. Could you put it into presentation mode, please?
Chairman, forgive me for, there you go. I was just about to sort of
Yeah.
offer Emma some guidance, but she's done it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
fantastic. Thank you, Emma. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, the site plan shows where the new bungalow would be sited at the bottom of number 91, and it will be accessed by the existing access drive, which is to the north of number 91, which leads up to the detached garage of the host property, which is shown outlined in red here, and together with other outbuildings also outlined in red, which would be demolished to facilitate the new unit. The outline in blue shows a previously withdrawn application for a similar scheme, which was withdrawn due to concerns on the impacts on the protected trees. The next slide. This shows the proposed elevations showing the scale of the bungalow. The floor plans shows that the internal floor areas of the unit would meet the national described space standards for a 2-bedroom, 4-person bungalow, which complies with Policy LN1. Next slide. This is an aerial image taken from Google, which shows that there's an established pattern of backyard development to the grade, which is to the north, immediate north of the site. The red star shows where the backyard would be sited. And as you can see, the grade has similar backyard development of 3 units there. This photograph shows the existing access drive that would serve the proposed unit. This photograph shows the part of the plot and also shows the area of number 91 and the view back up the access drive. The backyard would be sited where you see a small tree and demolished sheds. This one shows the existing garage which is to be demolished together with these outbuildings, and also shows there's mature trees and landscaping screening the site from properties to the rear. This is a photograph showing the view back up the access drive and also shows the adjacent properties. This number 93, the grove there, and number 2 to the left. This is a view from the plot here, facing number 2 and other properties along the grade. This is a street view image taken from Google, which shows that the street scene is valid. And you can see the access drive to the grade. And the proposed access drive would be along here. This shows the front of number 91, the Grove. As you can see, they would have enough parking to the front. And this is the access drive that will be leading to the new unit. Okay, the proposed site plan shows that in conclusion, the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of impact on character and visual amenities of the area. The character of the street scene, as shown in previous images, is valid, and the proposal would have limited views from public viewpoints. The materials would be in keeping with the area. The plot sizes are comparable to others in the area and does not represent an overdevelopment of the site. The scheme is therefore compliant with Policy HE2. The proposal would have sufficient living conditions in terms of internal floor area and private amenity space for both the new unit and the host property. The new unit would have 2 parking spaces, one within the integral garage and one within the front driveway, and there will be cycle storage within, which can be accommodated within the garage. The host property would have at least 3 parking spaces in the front driveway. The BCP Highways officer was consulted that there is no objection subject to conditions. With regards to neighbor amenity, given the scale, siting, and separation distances, no harmful impacts would result from the proposal. With regards to the protected trees, no trees would be lost, and the tree officer raised no objections subject to conditions, which includes provision of soft landscaping. Heath mitigation would be secured by a Section 106 agreement. The proposal would make a modest contribution to housing supply in the area, and therefore applying the tilted balance, this tilts in favor of approving this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hollyoak, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The first objection is from Mel Webb. There should be at some point 3 photographs on screen to accompany this statement as it's read out. I am writing to object to this planning application as the direct neighbour of number 91 The Grove. I'm objecting based on 1. Noise and pollution. There is already an access road on the opposite side of my property leading to 3 houses, as well as a busy road in front. From these roads alone, there is already substantial traffic noise. If this development were to be approved, I will have access roads all the way along both sides of my property. This means I will have traffic noise and pollution along 3 sides of my property and garden, along with increased noise in my garden from another household. The above will all disturb the peaceful enjoyment of my property. There is no other property on the road that has 2 access roads on either side to more than 3 houses. The proposed access road is also very narrow and will run directly adjacent to the wall of my house, potentially leading to damage. 2. Congestion and road safety. This development will add at least 2 extra cars to this already congested small section of the road. It will be very close to the driveways of number 91, 93 and the Glade, containing 3 properties, as well as an active bus stop. This will increase the likelihood of an accident in this busy area. As parking at the property is limited, it will lead to visitors, etc., parking on the road, leading to increased obstruction of the road. The heavily congested area will be made more dangerous by a large protected tree which obscures visibility to the access road. This obstructed visibility poses a danger to other vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists, especially if vehicles from the property are reversing. This will be likely as turning space is limited at the proposed property. I would also like to note that the traffic officer did not physically visit the site despite requests from residents, and I believe that an actual site visit is essential to understand the congestion complications of the road. 3. Overdevelopment. This proposed new property is overdevelopment and overcrowding. It will also not be in keeping with the look of the road, as the 2-bed bungalow will be surrounded by much larger family-sized properties. It will also have a negative visual impact on my property and reduce light to both the ground floor, rear of my property and garden. And 4. Loss of green space. This development is a garden grabbing exercise. If approved, it will lead to loss of green space, which is home to many different species of wildlife, including slow worms. This goes against BCP's policies of preserving green spaces. Objection 2. Annette Partridge. I would like my objection statements to be read out as part of the planning review into this overdevelopment. 1. The impact this development would have on the safety of pedestrians and motorists on this already busy road is of unquestionable concern, exacerbated by very poor visibility on leaving the narrow drive. 2. The number of family dwellings in this area with decent grounds for children to play out safely is reducing at an alarming rate and has been noted by several local families as a particular issue for lockdown. This development reduces the garden area to tiny proportions and constitutes overdevelopment driven by financial greed. I previously submitted a more detailed objection and trust my points have already been incorporated in the objection summary. And a statement in support from Matthew Stevens of Aspire Architects. Thank you for allowing me to address you in support of this planning application today. This proposal is the result of over 14 months of liaison and consultation with your planning and tree officers, as well as site meetings and consultation between our tree consultant and local residents who live adjacent to the site. Further to the previous planning application that was withdrawn in December 2020 for a 3-bedroom bungalow, we took the advice of your planning officer at the time and reduced the size, footprint and position of the proposed bungalow to overcome issues raised by your tree officer on the potential future impact of the property on the protected off-site trees. Your tree officer is now satisfied that the scheme in front of you today is acceptable and she supports this planning application as set out in the case officer's report. This area of West Christchurch is now characterised by backland development and the proposed plot is positioned next to the Glade, which is a larger backland development. The access to the plot is already established as an existing large garage will be demolished, which will actually reduce impact upon adjacent protected trees to the site. The proposed bungalow will have a very large garden, giving future occupiers lots of amenity space, and this proposal will provide much needed family housing when there is a published shortfall of housing supply in BCP. The current application was submitted in December 2020, and it has taken nearly 12 months to get to this point. We have worked hard with your planning and tree officers to overcome all material planning issues, as well as concerns raised by local residents to the site. I therefore ask you to support your planning and tree officers today and grant this planning application and allow this modest 2-bedroom bungalow to be approved. Thank you for your time today. And there is a written statement from Ward Councillor Margaret Phipps. I have called this application to committee as I consider it does not comply with core strategy policies HE2 landscaping and HE3 landscape character. The development is not compatible with or improves its surroundings because of its scale, bulk and height. The application is also contrary to saved policy H12 of the Christchurch local plan, being inappropriate in character and scale to the immediate locality and amounts to overdevelopment of the site. The proposal for this large property on a garden plot conflicts with policies H12 and HE2. The development is not in character with the immediate locality due to the small size of the plot in relation to the large size of the dwelling. I understand that the Christchurch Borough-wide Character Assessment 2003 is still a material planning consideration in assessing the application, and it identifies the site as being within a special character area. Paragraph 591 of that assessment is still true today. It says, the tree cover of the area has suffered from infill development, reducing the size of garden plots. Significant areas of the neighbourhood have already accommodated a lot of infill or plot division to provide new housing. There is a real sense that the areas have been developed to capacity. While some potential infill sites remain, there is a danger with more infill, the neighbourhood would read as a crammed environment. Back garden development does not enhance an area, it just crams in more housing and changes the character of the locality to the detriment of existing residents. There is no need, even under the tilted balance which is mentioned in the officer's report, for just a single property like this, when the disbenefits to the area outweigh its single contribution to housing supply. I ask you to refuse this application as contrary to local plan and core strategy policies HE2, HE3 and H12.
Thank you, Ms Holyoake. Either Emma or Mr Hodges, are there any things you would like to come back on, please, regarding what you've heard so far?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just a couple of points of clarity for members. In the Christchurch local plan, there are no specific special character areas identified for this particular area. So the policies that apply equally across the plan area would apply equally to this side. So there's no particular special character to be assessed or regarded in that respect. You'll see we've set out in the report deliberately about the issue on backland development and how there is not a policy in the local plan to prevent that. So the application needs to be considered on its merits. And it's also true, Chairman, that since the adoption of the character assessment, Christchurch character assessment back in 2003, a number of properties have been built within this area. As you can see from the Ordnance Survey plans, and they typically take in the form of backland development. And from our records, the proceeding authority has granted around 33 new dwellings within this particular part of the Grove and Canberra Road since the adoption of the character area document back in 2003. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hodges. Members, Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I find myself in the difficult situation, really, that I concur with much of the objections by neighbours, and I can see what they're concerned about, but we seem to have lost the battle against backland development. So this is a problem in refusing it, because I think this is the main objection technically. Because in this case, there are nearby precedents. It's backland development has got into this area, and once it gets into this area, it changes the character anyway. But I did take, there was only a very slight reference to overshadowing neighbouring gardens, and I think this is a bungalow, and the problems, because bear in mind that the adjacent properties that are most affected by this are to the north of the property again. You know, whilst I think a single-storey bungalow is no problem, I'm wondering whether there's scope to restrict the ability to take up in future, and this is only a cautionary thing really, permitted development rights that allow you to put additional stories on, because I think you can turn a bungalow into a house quite easily. Now, if that was done under permitted development in a few years' time, that would have the adverse effect that people fear at the moment. So I'm wondering whether it's possible to build a restriction into the planning permission that prevents additional stories being added to the building.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Emma, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Looking at the proposed elevation plans, the bungalow is of a shallow pitch roof, so it's not considered there's sufficient space there to create living accommodation within the roof, and so there was no need to restrict extensions.
No, we're just talking about whether or not we can put in a condition to remove any more permitted development rights.
Yeah, yes, I'm if I can interrupt, I'm particularly concerned about I think the latest changes that were made last year or earlier this year that allows someone, I don't know whether it's got the rubber stamp yet, that allows people to put additional stories on, and I think a bungalow is allowed one additional story, and I'm sort of concerned at that possibility, even though it might be irrelevant at the moment. But I just wonder whether we should take the precaution of preventing it going into a two-storey building.
Chair, might I be able to help Emma in answering this question?
Yeah, please do.
So we could restrict much of the PD rights for this site. We wouldn't be able to restrict everything. For instance, if they wanted to change their windows, replace windows in the future, but we can certainly restrict additional extensions being added to this property in the future as a condition.
Thank you for that. And I think, you know, bearing in mind what may come from further developments, I think that would be a good condition to add on to this one if at the end of the debate it does go for a move to grant. So thank you very much for that help. Does that satisfy Councillor Trent?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stribley.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, with Councillor Barron, I visited this site earlier in the week, and I think we are being slightly misled, or those that are perhaps not familiar with it, because initially, yes, I thought, oh, there is other backland development here, but the three bungalows to the rear have been put in either by the removal of one house in the grove or by the combination of land from two houses, because there is a full width roadway through. It's only gravel surface, but there is a full width roadway with hedges and shrubbery at the side of it. You could put in a full road into that little cul-de-sac called the Glade, which has three bungalows or semi-bungalows in it. This one, to me, yes, there is space behind the property, but the driveway down, the pictures, the photographs we've seen have been a bit misleading. The driveway down the left-hand side against the objector's house is extremely narrow. You could put one car through there just about comfortably. I don't see how it would be possible to put a large van or a builder's truck or anything else down through there to gain access. And also, the boundary to it is in effect the neighbour's wall. And I do take the point that a large vehicle or a carelessly driven vehicle down there could actually structurally damage the neighbour's house. And there certainly isn't room to put in, or I would not have thought there is room to put in a protective wall. My real concern on this one is that many properties in the borough have a driveway at the side to a garage slightly to the rear. And if we pass this one, I believe every house, or a very large percentage of properties right across the conurbation, would be open to similar developments. If you have a longish back garden, and many do, I'm not saying they shouldn't be redeveloped, but as one-off individual ones, it's not appropriate. If land is gathered together and you can make a small cul-de-sac with, as has happened at the Glades, next door but one to this property, then that's fine. But to allow individual ones at the back of ordinary detached properties, and 91 is described as a bungalow, but really it's anything but. It has a long sloping roof, but it's certainly not a bungalow. It's a very large property in itself. I personally am absolutely with the objectors and unusually agree with the ward councillor on this one, that I don't feel I can support it. Should the decision be to support it, then I would certainly support Councillor Trent's call for a restrictive covenant to remove permitted development rights for any extensions. If they choose to put a room in the roof of what's existing there, that would be fine. If they choose to extend outwards or upwards, that would be an entirely different matter. But I just think this one is definitely, for me, it's not on.
Thank you, Councillor Tribble. I'll just make a couple of comments on that. We're already in that situation where many properties across the whole conurbation are already doing backland infill, using their side drives going down into back gardens. This is no different to many others that this board's dealt with over, certainly on the years that I've been chairman in Bournemouth and here.
Not in Poole, Chairman.
And we're not in Poole now, Councillor Stribley, we're dealing with BCP wide. And so there is that. And just to come back on the development rights, a little bit of information that I certainly didn't realise is that PD rights do not apply to the houses built after October 2018, and nor do they apply to houses built before July 1948. So this property would not benefit from permitted development rights in any case, and that's something I was totally unaware of, and I thank the officers for putting that into my little chat box here to inform me on that one. Mr. Hodges, is there anything you would like to come back on at the moment?
No, thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify that point, the specifically that right to put another story on to a bungalow, it doesn't apply to a property built after 2018, but also the other rights within the PD regs, like adding a dormer, like adding a rear extension, would still apply to the property. So if there was a concern about an overriding harm from any of those potential roof alterations, extensions, and we'd need to be able to show there was a very good reason for that, because the government actively discourages us from removing PD rights. But if there's a very good reason to do so, we can have a condition along those lines. Hope that helps.
Could we have some more advice, though, on the protection of the wall of the neighbouring property? Because normally you don't have vehicles your own driving alongside your own wall of your house.
Emma?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I'm going to ask Mr. Hodges to help with that one.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, Councillor Sibley, could you just provide me a little bit more clarity? I'm not quite sure what your concern is in that regard.
The proposed driveway down the side is extremely narrow. A large vehicle or 4x4 would just about get through. The neighbour is concerned that it's against the wall of her property and vehicles are not separate, would not be separated at all from the flank wall of the neighbouring property. How can that property be protected against potential damage from a large vehicle or inappropriate access?
I'm happy to take legal advice, but that strikes me as a private matter between the owner of if the dwelling, if it is built, and the applicant and the owner of the adjacent property. So there's no right given for them to drive their car into the side wall of the neighbouring property. So in terms of the safety of that access, that's been considered by the Highways Authority, and they've looked at that, whether that's acceptable, that provides adequate access, visibility, turning, parking within the site. The number of traffic movements on a single dwelling is very, very low. So any potential conflict is minimised as well from that point of view as well. So I would not see that as being a material planning reason for refusal, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Gould, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It might actually put my hand up in respect of the discussion that was just going on earlier around PD rights, but Mr. Hodges effectively gave you sort of the accurate advice that I was seeking to give you, that I wouldn't have wanted to have misled members into thinking that PD rights don't apply to any property that was built before 1948 or after, the 28th of October 2000. That was a specific response in response to Councillor Trent's comment about the newer PD rights that allow the upward extension of existing dwellings. And so that is what is known as Class AA of the General Permitted Development Order. And so that restriction applies only to that. Mr. Hodges is absolutely right to inform members that if this property is approved and built, in theory, it would still benefit from the older permitted development rights, which would allow them to insert windows or dormers subject to set criteria. So again, if that was a concern to members, you could add a condition to remove that. Just on the point that's been raised by Councillor Stribley, I don't know if Emma's able to put back up the photograph that shows the view down the driveway from out in the street scene, but I'm looking at it myself on Street View, and actually I would suggest that it's of an adequate width. Obviously, your highway officers haven't raised concern with that, and actually in the Street View scene, it's that I'm looking at. It shows it's an existing driveway that is used by the host property. It shows that vehicles actually pass the side wall of the garage of that neighbouring house, and there's a car parked in the driveway on the image that I'm looking at, and the driveway seems adequately sufficient in terms of width to negate any reasonable person of sound driving ability to pass that without bumping into that garage. Thank you, Chairman.
I have to say that photograph does not resemble what I saw when I stood on the street scene, and I suggest that it's been taken to give the optimal effect.
Thank you, Councillor Stribley. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, I've been to the site and I've also listened to the ward councillor, and I think the ward councillor made some very good points. I do think it's slightly overdeveloped. I do think you're going to have a loss of light to some of the other properties, and I think that the lane is very narrow that you go down. So I won't be able to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you. It'd be interesting to know what the width of the drive is. It is an existing drive already being used to drive up to the garage that's located at the back. I understand there is a minimum requirement for a driveway width of 2.4 metres. Just looking at, I guess this probably is, but it'd be interesting to see if the officer can actually come up with a dimension just to check that it is within the minimum required. That's probably down to the, I'm not sure it's the highways officer or not, but I'm certainly aware there is a specified minimum for an access driveway. In terms of the back garden development, there's already a pattern of development that reflects rear garden development in this area, and indeed there's one right next door. It's very difficult to suggest that you cannot develop this one when there are others in the immediate vicinity. So the pattern of development, I think, has already been established, and therefore the character is altered already in that respect. And one more, I don't think is really going to alter the character at all. So in terms of light, it's very difficult to imagine how the light is really going to be affected on any adjacent properties. I think I'm struggling to find any material reasons why this shouldn't be granted, and therefore I'll move to grant it.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Any further, Councillor Borthwick?
I don't think we should take into someone's driving ability to grant a building costing this much. I mean, looking at that picture there, you can see clearly that some of the moss against the fence is not even touched. Now, if you were driving down there, you're nowhere near the fence. I looking at that, to me, it seemed entirely comfortable to be able to drive down there if you've got if you're a qualified driver.
Thank you, Councillor Borthwick. Councillor Johnson.
Chair, sorry, can I just come back?
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I meant to mention, I do believe that we should condition against permitted, to prevent permitted development rights applying, because I think there could be a material effect on adjacent properties should there be an alteration to the roof.
I fully agree with you, Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, thank you.
Fully agree with you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding the back garden development, I appreciate that what is next door in the glade is a slightly different form of it. It's a much larger form of it, but to all intents and purposes, that is what it is. If you look along that line, at some point, that was clearly the back gardens to properties to the front and to the rear. And it has been back garden developments. And if you look in the photos that are provided, they're much larger, shallow properties. And I really cannot see the potential harm in what is a fairly small bungalow going in this position. I certainly can't understand the arguments around loss of light, given that there's many meters between the proposed developments and the houses on the road, and given that it's smaller, I really can't understand that particular argument. Regarding the wall to the garage, I'd be a little bit more concerned if it was the wall to the actual house. But the fact is that if the plot boundary is the same as the house boundary, that's really not a matter for us. We can't take into account that whoever owns the new development is going to come home drunk one day and drive through the side of the garage. It's just not something that we can consider, I don't think. If that's the plot boundary, then that's the plot boundary, and that's how it is. If the driveway meets the minimum standards, then it does. It's as simple as that. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that the character is already established with this background development. A few houses down, it might be a bit more of a balanced decision, but given that it's right next door to some further development, I really can't see any reasons to refuse this, and I would second Councillor Bartlett's move. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Will we be given the width of the driveway?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Mr. Hodges. Mr. Hodges, are you ready to come back?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman. Emma, could you just put the layout plan up, please, just for clarity for members? And so, having taken that's perfect. Having taken the measurement opposite the neighbour's garage at number 93, the driveway width measures 3.5 metres at that position between the red line. And then you'll see there's a tiny little pinch point for number 91's garage, which sticks out slightly into the driveway further back. And then the driveway measures 2.9 metres on the plans at that point. Hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodges. Councillor Hilliard first, please, and then Councillor Pedman.
Thank you, Chair. If we're minded to approve this, is it possible to put a condition about the surfacing of the driveway. I know if the neighbours have asked for not gravel. The picture in front of us suggests it's going to be block paving, but could there be a condition, please?
Mr. Hodges?
Yes, it's a short answer. Yes, yeah, we could control the surfacing of the driveway if there was perceived to be a noise issue arising from that. But as I say, the principle is that there would be very, very few traffic movements along that route. But we can, in principle, control that. Yes, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pedderman, then Councillor Barron, please.
Thank you, Chair. Strangely enough, when I went to see this property yesterday afternoon, a vehicle presumably from 91 actually was using the driveway with the double gates open, so I was able to see right through to the double garage, and there did appear to be plenty of space, or adequate space, not plenty, adequate. In a situation like that, I think it's a great pity that house owners perhaps don't get together. I have to admit, I don't know the area well, only what I saw when I visited yesterday. But on the plan, I'm on page 101 of our documents, the gardens from the house, from the road behind, well, we can't see any building at all. They look extremely long. So it seems to me maybe if homeowners were able to get together and make a sizable plot, you know, a bit from one and a bit from the other, it would be much better for future inhabitants, possibly enabling bigger properties or more property. I don't know. In this case, I think the applicant's submission talked about the new property having a large garden. No, it's got a bit of garden, but it hasn't got a large garden. And I also wonder, in the Christchurch plans documents, it says that the amenity space should be at least equal to the footprint of the property. And I would query whether this one actually is. It might just about be, but I would query. But again, it's another of these. I'm not happy, but I can't actually find a real reason for saying no. I would be much happier if they got a bigger plot. For instance, if they could come in off the glade to that bit of the neighbouring garden and make the access there, for instance, would be better. But we are where we are, as I keep saying. Every application, I think I've said that. And I really would like to turn it down, but I don't think I can on valid reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Barron.
Thank you, Chair. I initially had concerns over the trees. There's an exceptionally good oak tree on the site, and there's a garage with a concrete slab, so I was concerned about the removal of the concrete slab, but the arboricultural impact statement covers that, so I'm okay with that concern. But we were all written to yesterday regarding the boundary. One of the neighbours is alleging that the proposed goes into their land. Is that something we should consider, or is it really a situation where someone can apply for permission on someone else's land and that is a planning consideration?
Before I answer, I'm going to call in Mr. Firth on that one, get the legal perspective on that. Mr. Firth?
Chairman, the answer to that is yes, it certainly is an issue, or certainly can be an issue. Obviously, when a person applies, they complete an application form and a certificate certifying land ownership. And I don't know what certificate was completed in this case, but if it was certificate A, they'd be certifying that they owned all the land. I don't know the portion of land that we're concerned with, but if it hasn't been checked, the council is entitled normally to rely on the certificate because it's a criminal offence to incorrectly state ownership on a certificate. But if we're on notice that there might be an issue, it's probably something we should look into if we haven't done so. And of course, I don't know if we haven't done so already, but on that basis, I would say that if we haven't checked it, it would be prudent for it to be checked before a decision was finally issued on this, if members are, of course, were minded to approve it in the first place.
Yeah. So that basically, if we approve it, it can be approved, but
You can approve it,
notice would
essentially,
be
Chairman, you'd have
checked.
to approve it subject to it being
Yeah,
clarified that there was no issue.
and then if there was an issue, then that would
It
not
would
be
have
issued.
to come back potentially, depending on what turned out to be the issue.
Yep, no, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any further members wishing to speak? We have a move from Councillor Bartlett, seconded by Councillor Johnson. No further members to speak. In that case, we will move to the vote, please. And could we have the condition? We just need to talk briefly about the condition for permitted development rights to make sure that we have the right reasons for wanting to impose that condition. So could we just have a small debate on that of what the concerns are? Councillor Trent and then Councillor Bartlett, please.
Yeah, I think the reason why I came up for it, and it's obviously it's not as powerful a condition as they fall outside the latest changes to permitted development rights, but it's I think the point's been made about the actual the building and the amenity space is pretty equal. It's kind of it's barely reasonable, but as a straightforward bungalow, it doesn't provide any significant overshadowing of adjacent properties. But as soon as you start adding dormers to it or inappropriate dormers to it, or you start expanding it in other ways, that point becomes more valid. So I felt, in fact, I still feel it's worth adding something like that. So at least it has to come back here if it wants to go outside. Because obviously changing the designs, layouts of the windows and things like that, that's fairly insignificant. But I do think that we need that that fallback to avoid it sort of expanding in any way.
So could I summarise then maybe and say that our reasonings for wanting this is to prevent any future adverse impacts on neighbours from any future building, any extensive buildings from the property? Councillor Bartlett, you're the mover.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, specifically, permitted development allows dormer windows, for example, and there could be a very direct effect on the adjoining to the glade and also to the amenity areas of number 91 if dormers were introduced into the roof. And so, exactly the point you've made. I'm happy with the words that you've used. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Mr Hodges or Emma, are you happy with the wording of that condition?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, yeah, if we're looking at removing rights under Class B and Class C to extend or alter the roof, I'm satisfied with that. I think from a planning perspective, we can't see a compelling reason to remove their ability to either put up a shed in the back garden or to extend the property to the rear, because they could only do a single-storey extension. It's hard to see what harm that would cause, and any windows at ground floor level are screened by the boundary fences. So yes, I think a condition removing rights under parts B and C, which is the roof alterations, I think would cover it, as I interpret what members are concerned with.
And also, Mr Hodges, could we add a condition as requested to ensure that the driveway is permeable? Councillor Bartlett.
Yeah, I'm not sure that sorry?
Not gravel.
Sorry, I mean, I'm not totally sure that we do require to have that. What's there at the moment? Is the traffic movement going to be any more than it is at the moment?
Yeah, this is also
probably not. So I don't know. I think it might be just going a bit too far to insist on something like that.
Councillor Stribley.
Sorry, Chairman. I think the request was that it shouldn't be gravel, because gravel is a very noisy subject. So, quite frankly, I wouldn't, if it goes through, I wouldn't mind if it's tarmac or paved or whatever. But I would sympathise with the neighbours that maybe it shouldn't be gravel.
If we leave it as it is at the moment, because at the moment it does have to be an agreement with the local planning authority for them to agree it. So I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, the point point is, if it's noisy now, it'll be the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
So you're actually asking for a betterment, I guess, than the current situation. But if you say it, you know, if it's left with officers to approve that anyway,
Yeah.
then we don't
Then
need
we're
to
fine.
condition it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. I'm happy with that. So shall we move to the vote, members? In that case, myself, I am for. Councillor Johnson, please.
For.
Councillor Bartlett.
Or
Councillor Barron.
For.
Councillor Bull.
for.
Councillor Davies.
For.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
Councillor Hilliard.
For.
Councillor Pedevin.
For.
Councillor Stribley.
Against.
Councillor Trent.
For.
And Councillor Borthwick.
Or.
Thank you. Numbers, please, John.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 10 votes in favour and 2 against, so that application is granted.
And that will be under the proviso that it is subject to the HOP being satisfied that the correct certificates of ownership are in place, bearing on the points that Councillor Barron brought up earlier. Thank you for that, Councillor Barron. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Emma. Members, we will now move on to the final application today, which is item 6D, 27 Vale Road in Poole. And I'll ask Rebecca if she could present her case, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you see my screen?
I can indeed. Thank you.
So today I'll be presenting 27 Vale Road, and they propose to replace the existing extension, conservatory and carport with a 2-storey side and rear extension. Here we can see the site is located in Upper Parkstone in Poole, and it's surrounded with residential properties. The site is outlined in red, and we can see the surrounding area is detached properties with narrow plots. This is the front of the site of the application, and they have a carport to the far left and right of the photo and off-road parking. And this photo shows the rear of the property, and there's a conservatory and the extension which are to be demolished, with the carport on the far left of the photo. So the 2 photos on the screen are taken from the rear garden. The photo on the left shows number 18 Crescent Road, which is on an elevation, and number 27A Vale Road, neighbouring the property to the west. The photo on the right it's from the second tier of the garden, as it's on an elevation, and we have views of number 25. So I took the photo to the left from number 25 Vale Road, and we can see the conservatory and the wall on the shed boundary with some shrubs and trees adjacent to the boundary. The photo to the right is the existing conservatory and extension, which will be replaced with the 2-storey rear extension. Here we can see the street scene. The photo to the left, it's taken from the northeast of the site, with the views of number 25 and 27 and 27A. And we have the photo to the right, which is taken on the northwest of the site, and it's looking to the east of Vale Road. So we have the existing site plan, which illustrates the distance between the existing property and the neighbouring properties. Here we have the existing elevations, and these are showing what is currently on site and the relation it has with number 27A. There's the distance near the carport, and there's a distance in between the housing with number 25. Here we can see the existing floor plans. We have the proposed site plan, which we can see the proposed extension, side extension facing number 27A. And there is the 2-story rear extension here, which is adjacent to the boundary shared with number 25. And there would be proposed decking at the rear, and this would be at ground floor level. And the rear garden would be re-landscaped, but it will still be on an elevation. To the left of the screen, we can see the previously approved application, which proposes a similar, if not the same, proposed developments. And we can see the line, the 45-degree line, just from the habitable room at number 25. It has gone over just under 5 degrees. And previously it was proposed to have a steel bridge leading to the rear garden from the proposed bedroom, but that has not been implemented on this proposal. So the proposed north elevation, we can see the front of the property where the 2-story side extension with the carport would match the existing house in terms of design. We have the gabled end roof design, and the finishes and material would also match the existing property, and it would not be out of character. It would in fact be in keeping with the existing dwelling and the street scene. And above at the top right is the previously approved plan, which is similar to what is currently proposed. So the proposed south elevation shows the rear of the site, and this we can see the 2-story side extension with the carport. Again, at the rear, it will be rendered and it would match the building. And the proposed 2-story rear extension would be finished with cladding. This is more of a contemporary design, but because it's to the rear, it would not be harmful to the street scene. However, it will integrate with the existing dwelling due to the finishes material and the design of the fenestration. They would introduce a Juliet balcony, and this would not cause detrimental overlooking. They would impose a gabled end roof, which would again match the existing dwelling. The previously approved application proposed the same developments with the same design, and this was approved along with the steel bridge connecting from the window. The proposed west elevation, it shows the wall which would be seen from number 27A. They have removed the existing window, so there will be no windows or doors to the west elevation, and this would be the same as the previously approved application. The eaves height of the side extension would be 6.2 for the 2-story side extension above the carport, and the ridge height, the full ridge height would be 6.2, and the eaves height would be 4.7. And the ridge height for the rear extension would be a total of 7 meters with 4.7 eaves height. So we can see the difference here between the previously approved application where there was a bridge connecting from the first floor to the rear garden, and this has been removed for this application. And the proposed east elevation has they've proposed an obscure window, and this is to prevent the overlooking to number 25, and it will preserve their privacy. The extension would extend to the rear by 4.1 meters, and the ridge height, the full maximum ridge height would be 7 meters. There'll be roof lights to the east elevation, and compared to the previously approved application, the bridge has been removed and it was obscured with glass balustrade on the side elevations. So the proposed ground floor plan intends to introduce larger living space on the ground floor, similar to what was previously approved. The first floor plan introduces a bedroom to the rear with the Juliet balcony on the bedroom on the far right of the screen. And the window for the bedroom would be obscure, but it would have roof lights to provide more natural light. And there would be a bathroom and a bedroom to the side single two-story extension. So here we have the neighbouring properties on Vale Road, where the two-story extension would be seen. This would have material and design that would match the existing house and will not be outkeeping with the current outlook of the area. And so for the reasons set out in the report and the presentation, the officer's recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Ms Holyoake, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The first objector is Mr and Mrs Giles, and again this statement will be accompanied by a photo on the screen. I am writing an objection to the extension to 27 Vale Road. Being a neighbour, this will have a major overbearing impact to our garden due to the significant scale and height of the extension, as all neighbouring properties are set at lower level to number 27. This would result in loss of sunlight and daylight to all properties. To the east of the proposed extension, especially the late afternoon evening sun, which at the moment is enjoyed by all. The design of the proposed extension fails to relate to the existing dwelling and street scene and represents an incongruous and contrived form of development that would affect the visual impact of the area. We would argue that the proposal sets an unacceptable precedent for similar developments which would erode the character of the area. This proposal is an unneighbourly form of development and contrary to Policy PP 27 of the Poole Local Plan 2018, the National Planning Policy Framework 2019 and National Design Guide 2019. The pictures submitted in October by the householder of 27 Vale Road do not show correct angles of the sun. The evening sun comes from the direction between 18 Crescent Road and 27A Vale Road and not between 16 and 18 Crescent Road as shown on the sketches. Through the summer months, all the gardens benefit from the sun due to the longer evenings. This will be compromised by the planned height of the development. I am requesting that the application is refused. And the second objection is from Edward Jerry. I have read the officer's report relating to this application and consider that it does not fully address the impacts of the two-storey rear extension element of the proposal, particularly in respect of the harm that would result to the living conditions of the occupiers of neighbouring properties. My concerns are as follows. The proposal would have a major overbearing impact to the outlook enjoyed by the occupiers of properties to the east due to its position adjacent to the eastern boundary and its significant scale, length and height. These neighbouring properties are also set at lower levels to the application dwelling, which exacerbates the detrimental impact of the two-storey rear extension. The two-storey rear extension would result in a loss of sunlight and daylight to the properties to the east due to its position and excessive height and depth, and would cause overshadowing to the direct rear amenity areas of numbers 25 and 23. The proposal sets an unacceptable precedent for similar developments, which would erode the character of the area to the detriment of overall visual amenity, as well as setting a precedent for allowing development that would have a significant adverse impact on the amenities enjoyed by the occupiers of the neighbouring dwellings. To summarise, the two-storey rear extension element of the proposal is an unneighbourly form of development which is overbearing and would result in a loss of outlook and sunlight and daylight to the occupiers of neighbouring properties to the east, contrary to Policy PP 27 of the Poole Local Plan 2018 and the National Planning Policy Framework. It is requested that the application is refused. A single-storey rear extension would be a more appropriate form of development. And there are no further statements. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Olliott. Before we go to debate, I'll just remind members that there is no such thing as a precedent in planning. Each application is dealt with on its own merits. Councillor Pedevin, please.
Yeah, just confirmation. Actually, it's following up from what you've just said. The previous application was actually approved under delegated powers in October 17 or 8. So can I confirm whether that has in fact lapsed? So we're starting from scratch.
Rebecca, could you answer that, please?
Yes, Chairman, the previous application has lapsed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from anyone here? Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, regarding the previous approval, so has anything, to the officer please, has anything changed since the pool local plan has come along that would have potentially made us not approve that previous application? Thank you.
Not much has changed since the previous local plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the precedent, obviously there is no such thing as precedent, but consistency is very important as a planning committee. We do have to deal with it on its own merits, but as far as I'm concerned, if the officer can confirm that there have been no significant policy changes since that last scheme was granted, I think we'd be hard pressed to find policy reasons why we should refuse this one. And just to talk about this one itself, I think it's actually better than the previous scheme because of the lack of that steel bridge. Because I think that steel bridge would have had a serious impact. And to be honest, when I first read the report, I was very much concerned about the rear extension, the carport and the side extension. I had no issues with whatsoever. The rear extension I was a bit concerned about, but in all honesty, when I went out there to see it and had a look at the topography, I think that's what saves this application is the local topography. Because any overlooking already comes from the properties that are behind it that are set up, much higher due to topography. The first floor window of this two-storey extension would look out onto garden level of the property, and I certainly can't see any planning reasons to refuse this, given the previous decision and the lack of any significant policy changes since then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any further comments from any members? If the Councillor Borthwick.
Yes, maximum sunlight available. Has the officers measured that or inspected that the new extension doesn't inhibit that?
Rebecca, could you comment on that, please?
Yes, the loss of sunlight has been considered, and the sunrise and sunset from east to west, and there would be some loss of afternoon light at sunset towards the for properties at number 25, but we consider it would not be detrimental.
Thank you very much. Happy? Everyone happy with that? In that case, I can see no planning reasons why we cannot grant this one. I think there is, a betterment here from what it was. It's always difficult in that road because of the topography of that road. It's very steep in places, isn't it? It is confusing when you go and have a look at the properties there. But I'm happy to move this one along with the officer's recommendation. The second, Councillor Johnson. Any members wish to make any comments? If not, we'll move to the vote. Okay, we'll move to the vote on that one. Thank you very much, members. So myself, I am for. Councillor Johnson?
For.
Councillor Bartlett?
For.
Councillor Barron? For. Councillor Bull?
For.
Councillor Davies?
For.
Councillor Hall?
For.
Councillor Hilliard?
For.
Councillor Pedevin?
For.
Councillor Stribley?
For.
Councillor Trent?
Abstain.
And Councillor Borthwick?
Abstain.
Thank you very much. By my reckoning, that is therefore granted. Thank you very much, members, and thank you, Rebecca, and the officers for your input into today's meeting. Thank you very much. With that, I will call the meeting to a close, but I will ask members to please stay on as we're going to have a catch up with Mr. Perrins on a few items.